Also, we have a sign-up sheet, which is the chat. So if you would put your name, perhaps where you're from in the chat, that would be great. We've also, there should be a transcript option. Uh, if you're not familiar with that, it's under captions. And then if you go to one of the submenus, you can save what's said as an automatic transcript. The same is true for the chat. Saved chat is now, I've learned, in the upper right-hand corner of the chat box. Used to be down at the bottom. So if you want to save the chat, you can do that as well. We will try to capture any resources that are mentioned today and put them in the document that we started. So there's not going to be a seminar next month because of the IPS meeting. And the month after that, Alan will be giving the seminar. Alan, do you want to tell what the title is or a
Uh,
short
uh,
description?
it's it's honoring the legacy of Alan Friedman and all participatory programs that I forgot what the title is, but that's what the seminar is about. And we'll have several colleagues of Alan's there to bring their memories in and for everybody to learn about that.
Okay, thank you. And just another announcement, the registration has opened for the Western Alliance Conference um, meeting, which is to be held in October. So the WAC meeting will be held in conjunction with Great Lakes Planetarium Association. And so that early bird registration is now open. And so if you go to that website, if I find it, I'll put it in the chat later on. Um, but that is now open. And then now there's just to give a little bit of overview, this is a topic I'm interested in. That's probably the main motivation for this, and to gather people whose resources I want to use. And from people like Alan, to find out how to use them effectively and interactively in a planetarium environment. And so that's kind of the hope for today. It will probably last a little bit longer, depending on how long the discussion goes. Each panelist has about 5 minutes to talk. And then if that's not enough time, we can certainly come back to it and circle back. So let me see if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can also raise your hand and that's fine. Or if there's a pause, you can just speak up. The names and affiliation along with the resources are going to be in a single document that you can have afterwards. We have for our guests, let me pull it up here just to announce that at first. Um, and this is the order that people will talk today. So Anna's going to go first. Anna Hurst from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. She has a few announcements to make, and she's been involved in some of the climate activities there. Michael McConville from the IPS, the president, will say some words about IPS efforts, the town halls that were held, and a little bit about the conference, the meeting in Berlin. Jeff Nee from NASA could not make it, so he supplied us with a short video, which I will edit just a little bit to make it even shorter with his permission, but the entire video will be made available through the links. And Mark Sabaro is here from NASA with the Scientific Visualization Studio and perhaps some other efforts. Juan Ritardo is here from NOAA. So I'm very happy to get NOAA, Science on a Sphere, introduced more to the planetariums. And anything else you want to add from NOAA is fine. Um, John Keller from the Fisk Planetarium in Boulder is here, and he's made some really interesting movies, full dome movies having to do with climate, which are available for free. And Jeff Bennett is here, who's well known as an author and communicator and astronomer. And so just helping us focus a little bit on the communication effort uh, would be great, and any other words he has to say. So with that, let me start with Anna. And if I fall behind with putting resources in, they will be collected later. And thank you for Michael for putting the GLIPAWEC information in there. So please just add stuff as you want, and it will be collected. Um, so let's go ahead and start there, and I'll try to keep things on track a little bit. So Anna, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Anna Hurst from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. And my coworker Chanel is here also. Do you want to just say hi, Chanel? Um, and I think many of you are familiar with the ASP. I see many friends of the ASP here. But we are a small nonprofit organization based in San Francisco, but most of our programs are national and sometimes international in scope. And we try to provide resources and training for anyone who's talking to students and the public about astronomy and help them give them the resources they need to do that. So I just wanted to briefly share a couple things we're working on that are related to this topic. And I made a couple slides. Let me just find my screen share. So one is that we're really excited that we've been in conversations with IPS and also the California Academy of Sciences and AUI and Astronomers for Planet Earth, because we're really interested in exploring what planetariums are doing in this area of climate change and what resources and support you need to do more. Because we're hoping that we might be able to fill some of the gaps and provide that support in partnership with these other organizations. So we're conducting a survey, and we would love it if you would take the time to fill out this survey. We are wanting to learn more about what's going on, and we're gathering this data and want to share it at various conferences and in publications so we can help the field better understand what's needed. The survey it's a longer survey. It takes about 15 minutes to complete. We're keeping it open through October, but we would love it if you'd fill it out sooner so we have some results to share in these upcoming conferences. And as an incentive, we're giving 20% off of a 1 year of access to our online magazine, Mercury. And we'll also, for anyone who completes it by August 1st, we'll enter you into a drawing for a free registration to the ASP's upcoming virtual conference taking place August 22nd to 24th. And I want to tell you a little bit about our conference as well. But please fill out this survey. We would love to have a really robust set of responses so that we can really get a good picture of what's happening in the field now. We've been having a lot of great discussions on this topic, and it's very clear that planetariums want to be doing more. So help us understand what resources you need so we can support you in that. And then I mentioned the ASP's virtual conference coming up, and just want to put in a little plug for it because we are including a planetarium strand. We know that the planetarium world is celebrating the centennial, and we are really wanting to do more to support planetariums. It seems like an obvious fit for us. And we've recently hired some staff over the last couple of years who have planetarium experience. So we have a lot of that in our staff as well. We're also going to have a strand on climate change and environmental topics as well. So I figure this group would be a good one to plug this to. And I want to make sure you know that recordings of all the sessions will be available to registrants as well. So if you're not available to attend all of it live, you can still access the recordings. Early bird registration ends June 30th, and we're taking late abstracts for sessions until July 22nd. So there's still an opportunity to get involved and register. We have some limited scholarships available as well. And we're hoping to actually put together a session on this topic for the conference of communicating climate in planetariums. So if you would be interested in collaborating on a session like that, we'd love to hear from you. please reach out. So I'm going to drop some of this in the chat so you have the info. I don't want to take up too much time. I put my email here, but I realized we also want to include Chanel in that. I'll include his email in the chat. So I'll leave it at that and drop those links in the chat. Thanks so much for the opportunity to share this information with you all. And looking forward to hearing more about the resources that the other presenters have to share.
So that was wonderful. Thank you very much. Very concise and lots of information, which is perfect, by the way. I do have one question about the survey. Is it the same survey that was posted after the IPS town halls, or is this a different one?
This is, I believe, a different survey. We just launched this a few weeks ago.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
So if you filled out that one, you need to fill out this one too. Okay. I need to silence my phone clearly. Michael, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Rosemary and Alan, for facilitating the seminar today. Again, for those of you who might not have been here at the beginning, I'm Michael McConville. I am the president of the International Planetarium Society. We are incredibly happy that we're going to have a conference this year, first and foremost. So I know we'll be seeing some of you in Berlin next month. And really, to be a part of this conversation started back at the beginning of the year. We are very, very happy to be working with ASP and Cal Academy and others to build on what has often been an aspect of our public outreach that many planetarians have been very, very clear in their belief that, like, we don't have enough resources, and maybe it's not even the resources that are a problem. We just don't feel comfortable being a subject matter expert about this. With everything else that we're doing, we want to be able to represent, well, not necessarily the correct side, but probably the correct side of the climate change conversation. But in doing so now, it's understanding that with the collaborations that we have between IPS and ASP and others, that we're getting to the point where the resources that we have and can be made available are more useful for more and more types of planetariums and more different facilities around the world. Of course, it's understanding that climate change is one of, if not the most important issue facing the global population in the next 20 to 50 years, if not today. And being able to have these conversations. Back in February, we held 2 e-conference town halls through Dome Dialogues, and we were able to get a lot of really, really good feedback from that. Thank you to Alan for getting the links together for all that as well. But we have those available, and we'll be posting them more publicly to the IPS YouTube page, and so everyone can go back and take a look at those. But really, for us, with the upcoming conference next month in July, is an opportunity for us to have a lot of informal conversations with people from around the world about what they need to drive respondents to the survey, which will be a great thing, but also for us to see sort of where the pulse of the planetarium community is. And now, again, that these resources can work in more domes and there's more access to both the digital resources and the educational ones. All we want to do is help to identify the places in which we can provide a better service for the planetarium community, and really do think that allowing us, that helping everyone to have a better foundation for discussing climate change in ways that are inclusive and accessible to all of our audiences, but also turning it around on ourselves and making it a little bit easier for all of us to be able to work through those resources and know the right talking points. We're not, again, it's highly unlikely that we're going to convince people with facts, but we can talk to them and build these relationships and these dialogues. It's what planetariums, I think, do better than any other science communication gateway. We want to resource that as much as possible. Rosemary had requested, had gotten some feedback from individuals asking about, for those that can't go to IPS for whatever reason, there is a streaming option currently available. Registration for IPS closes in 2 days. And so if you go to ips2024.org, and we'll put that in the chat, you can go and see that there is a streaming option. It's a nominal cost, but there's still, the team in Berlin is still working on a few things here and there on the logistics. But the expectation is that there will be stream sessions and that there will be some participation, perhaps recordings to follow afterwards, after the conference is complete. But for those that will be in Berlin and those that will be at places like BAP or APLF or GLIPAWAC in October, we want to keep these conversations going. Bring your ideas, bring your inspirations and your problems, and let's have a discussion of how better we can resource and support this worldwide planetarium community. So Rosemary, back to you.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to thank the person who mentioned the book by Hae-Chung Yu and Travis Rector. Put that in the chat, because if you go to that link, the PDF or probably the EPUB version, if it has one, are free. So there's no cost for that book. And Travis had earlier made available the PDFs for the individual chapters before it was published, but now you can get a copy of the final book. So with that, the next thing is me, who I'm going to attempt to play. I can't do a Jeff Nee imitation, so I'm going to attempt to play his movie and try to shorten it just a bit, but we'll see. Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks to all of you who are attending and to all those watching in the future. There's a QR code to these slides. There are copious presenter notes and links to further
If
references.
you can't
So
hear,
feel free to
please
check it out.
speak up.
And as always, feel free to email me with
Fine.
questions and requests regarding NASA content. And thank you for being interested in engaging your audiences in Earth and climate science. The value of climate change data is quote unquote incalculable, considering how expensive battling climate change is and will be in the future. So the primary NASA climate change resource, of course, is the main NASA landing page. That's science.nasa.gov/climate-change. Pro tip, the old URL, climate.nasa.gov, still works for now. And it's much easier to remember if you just need to tell someone where to go, just climate.nasa.gov. There, you'll find most of the information that most people want. That's news, social media, multimedia, as well as detailed answers to almost any question an audience member might have. In the notes, I put a few things that I've gotten a lot, with direct corresponding links, including what is climate change, what causes climate change, what can we do about climate change, that kind of thing. The point is that for any audience member who has more questions about climate change beyond whatever you're showing in your dome, just tell them to try this webpage. And in extreme cases, my email is totally free to share if people have really detailed questions they want, like a person to answer them from NASA. I'm happy to address anyone who has those kinds of questions. I also have my own personal thoughts about these questions and other climate questions for those interested. Links are, again, in the notes. I do want to point your attention to the last menu item towards the top there, Eyes on the Earth. Clicking that will take you to NASA's interactive 3D Earth Science web app, which looks like this. NASA Eyes is simply the Swiss Army knife of NASA visualizations and education and public outreach. There are versions for solar system, exoplanets, asteroids, and more. This is the Earth Science version. It works on any modern browser, no installation required. So that means PC, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, tablet, smartphone, Chromebook, practically anything that can browse the web. So you can be standing in line at the grocery store overhear someone ask a question about climate change and then just pull out your phone and have this professional visualization running within seconds. I could do a whole hours just on eyes alone, and I am planning something in July, so stay tuned for that. But just quickly, I'm showing the latest satellite, cloud, and storm imagery, surface temperatures for the last few days, wildfire smoke, carbon dioxide concentrations, as well as a fully interactive and explorable model of the ISS. We can do any sort of Earth science satellite, and you can embed any and all of these directly into your own websites for your online visitors to play with. It helps boost your metrics in terms of people staying on the site and all that stuff. So your marketing department will be happy. And it also helps NASA too. So it's like double dipping. So please feel free to take these and put them wherever you want on your websites. It's a simple iframe embed. If you're not sure how to do that, let me know. We do have a special kiosk mode of these to put into your exhibit spaces, a way to kind of adjust and customize features. And it's also great for presentations, of course, on the museum floor, at festivals, workshops. And of course, almost all of the content can be extracted and imported into your dome with just a little bit of effort. NASA even installed a whole climate exhibit inside of our headquarters in Washington, D.C., if you ever get a chance to visit. But you can, of course, build your own exhibit using this and other resources found at earth.gov. That's just earth.gov. They made a really easy place to house all these resources. All right, so next is Earthrise. It's a new interagency newsletter dedicated to Earth and climate science education specifically. Not that people need yet another newsletter, but if teaching about climate change is important to you, the links to past issues and to sign up to receive new ones are in the presenter notes. These are just snapshots from the June issue. And in case our friends at NOAA didn't have time to mention it, I'll highlight for people the 360-degree video lessons. And yes, the 360 equirectangular videos are available for direct download, and they should be compatible with almost any digital dome system. All right. The Applied Earth Science Group at NASA is a place where you can go for stories, sometimes involving your local area, of researchers and policymakers utilizing NASA data in conservation and climate-related work. There's one story about red tides in Florida. There's an opportunity for funded research from NASA, and the bottom one is forecasting cholera outbreaks in Yemen. So we help all around the world. You can throw data at people as much as you want, but what I really like telling people is I like telling people the stories about climate change and about how it's affecting and how people are actually working on the problem. They also host regular and live archive trainings. They have a newsletter, they provide data tools, and of course there's an entire team of NASA contacts to help you utilize their services. Again, the links are in the presenter notes. There is the Climate Change Research Initiative. It's run out of the Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York, and it offers students and educators across the country an authentic climate science research opportunity. They collaborate with NASA scientists over a whole year to actually write their own climate science research paper. So it's a really good experience. And I know a lot of people have done like astronomy research programs like this, but this one's for climate science specifically and for educators and students. So you can see pictures from their big summer presentation and poster sessions along the bottom, and the top image has some of the GISS scientists meeting with their representative AOC. The point is that if you're really interested in diving into climate research, there are opportunities for you, your staff, and your students. And of course, new content is coming out all the time. There's literally a live stream talk today, 6/28 at 12 p.m. But of course, you can catch the recording afterwards at your convenience. NASA is constantly gathering data and trying to present it to the world. However, the flat truth is that NASA's role stops there. Our only job is to gather the data and share it with whomever will listen. But we legally cannot go beyond that. We can only report the data we have, and we can project models into the future to tell you what is most likely to happen based on what you and your audiences choose to do. Planetariums and educators, that's what makes your role so vitally important. NASA can't buy an ad on TV, we can't lobby lawmakers, or really tell anyone what to do with the data we have. However, we can provide you with information, tools, multimedia, and stories so that you can engage your own communities and inspire action to tackle the climate crisis. And there's more, of course, but I think I'll stop here for the sake of time. And you all now have the slides, so feel free to check them out. And again, if you have any questions at all, feel free just to, as a quick peek. I've got a planetarium curriculum. There's a really nice video that I hope Mark will mention. There's 360s, of course. There's a world viewer and citizen science, and just, a whole gaggle of things. So by all means, please let us know if you have any questions. Okay? Thanks. Have a good time, everybody. Bye.
So Jeff really did a nice introduction to a lot of the NASA web pages and resources you can find there. Anna put in the link to his presenter notes, which he says have a lot more resources in them. Personally, I haven't looked, but knowing Jeff, and he's always sent me resources every time I've asked him a question. So he really is a good source of information. And for those who don't know him, he's with NASA's Museum and Informal Education Alliance, which also covers the planetariums. So
Rosemary, there will, when this recording of this is posted, we'll include a link to, we'll probably put that video on the PPA YouTube channel, and we'll also post his slides on the archive page with the recording. So
yes, I do encourage people to see the entire video. I only cut out about 2 minutes at the first, but he really did a nice job with the motivation and the introduction, as well as that image you saw with all the satellites, which I cut out just for brevity. Okay, I think up next would be Mark.
All right. Thank you, Rosemary. Yeah, just to follow up a little bit on what Jeff said, but my name is Mark Subarow. I lead NASA's Scientific Visualization Studio. That is it's a pretty large group of people here at the Goddard Space Flight Center. We have a group of about 18 people. And we are constantly making resources related to climate change. In fact, in particular, especially in the last year, with an effort which I'll describe called the Earth Information Center, a large fraction of all that we do relates to climate. And I think, as you might have got a sense from Jeff, that one of the things that people don't really understand about NASA is that, well, as our administrator, Bill Nelson, likes to say, NASA is a climate agency. At the Goddard Space Flight Center, we have more working Earth scientists than any place in the world. Let me switch to my slides. All right, there we go. All right. So if you go to the SVS website, we've got a lot of resources. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. But I encourage you to spend some time searching. Unlike the climate site, which Jeff mentioned, our site is really not meant for the general public. It's meant for content creators. It's meant for you, people like the planetarium community. We've got a few things in full dome video. One piece I'll point out is on the right is this visualization that was part of the commercial show, Atlas of a Changing Earth, but our section of it is free and downloadable for anybody to use or incorporate in any of their programming. And we have the dome master frames for that. We have a new visualization, which I'm very excited about. It is showing you carbon dioxide globally, volumetrically, in 3D around the world. This is a brand new state-of-the-art computer simulation, the highest resolution simulation of carbon dioxide that's ever been run. And we have a dome render. It is not publicly available yet, but if you email me and you're willing to use it or try it out, I will get you early access. We are going to release this very shortly. There's my email. I'll also point out that my email is on the bottom of every SVS webpage, so I'm easy to find. We also create a lot of content in spherical video format, so Science on a Sphere format, which Juan Pablo will be describing after me. And that can all be uploaded into a digital planetarium system as a video texture around the Earth. So let me play some of the videos here, but just some examples. We have the global temperature record, which is kept from the Goddard Institute of Space Studies. We have running maps of sea surface temperature. This one's also highlighting areas that are warm enough to spawn hurricanes. The thing I'm playing is a supporting visualization that goes into how temperatures are measured globally. And in the upper right is an image of a visualization I really love, which we call tag CO2. It's a similar model of carbon dioxide, but it's broken down in many layers. So you can look at what's caused by humans, what's natural, and you can layer them in and out and switch between them in an interactive way. We also make plots like this, the climate spiral. And so we have a number of visualizations that are updated every month, every day. Like the sea surface temperature I was just showing is updated every day. This visualization is updated every month. The other ones are yearly things which are updated every year. We've made a big effort not only having all this content, but having it constantly curated and up to date. Let me give you another example. 2023 was not only by far the warmest year on record, it also saw our largest increase in sea level rise in the 30-some year record that we have satellite measures of sea level. So we have graphics about that as well. So these are just some examples of some of the sort of inset video content that's available. We also have interactive content that can be used for exhibits. This is something we just released for Show Your Stripes Day last Friday. We call it Climate Legacies. So what you're seeing is a figure that was in the IPCC report, but we've made it interactive so you can now customize it for your own family. So the idea is to show how the burden of climate change falls differently on different generations. And you can fill this out with your parents, your children, your grandparents, and whatnot, and see the different climate scenarios that they're going to live through. We've got a version of this that we are customizing for touch tables. So this, I think, would make a great standalone touch table exhibit outside of planetarium. And Jeff mentioned our big exhibit effort. This is something called the Earth Information Center. The website for that is earth.gov. I listed another website there where we have a lot of the content that goes into it. But this is an exhibit at NASA headquarters, and we'll soon be opening another exhibit at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum in DC and at the Kennedy Visitors Center in Florida. And it includes, among other things, this giant display, 8K display, which is streaming a loop of information more than 30 minutes long. That loop is a loop that it could be available to anybody. So if you're interested in setting up a version of this Earth Information Center, please talk to me. We'd love to, if you can find a big display, we can stream constantly curated, updated content to that. It includes both dashboards, which you're seeing before is a dashboard. On the right is a group of mayors from South America who are coming to view about greenhouse gases, but also narrated video pieces. So this will be a narrated video piece that went along with that installed. You can download this 8K video as well. We also have an immersive room exhibit as well, which is pretty fun. And, I'd also want to point out another great resource, the Earth Observatory, which is constantly, daily putting out images and stories. I know when the first planetarium show I did at the Adler Planetarium, we had a section called Earth Update that would change every month. And I would go to Earth Observatory to find an image, inset out that on the globe, and then sort of zoom into that. And that was a great resource. All right, I think I'll stop there and let you go into the next presenter.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. Next up, I believe, is John Keller from the Fisk Planetarium. Oh, excuse me, Juan, who has the Science on a Sphere and other NOAA information.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Juan Pablo Hurtado. I am the visualization lead for the Science Transfer program, and that is the program that I want to introduce to you. It's a small part of NOAA, but I will say we are mighty in the things that we do. So I'm going to share a little bit of that and the things that we are doing. So first, I want to show you our webpage. This is the page where you can go to find all the information, the visualizations that we post. As Mark mentioned, several of our visualizations not only come from NOAA, but from other institutions or agencies like NASA, museums, universities, and we collect in our catalog. If you are not familiar with what a science sphere is, that is the image. Basically, is one carbon fiber sphere, 6 foot in diameter, usually suspended, and we have projectors shining what would look like an Earth floating in a room. So for that, if we move a little bit into the catalog and we go to the dataset section, here you can find close to 650 different visualizations that cover everything from the surface of the sun to the depths of the ocean. So that's one of the things that NOAA prides itself, that we cover from the surface of the sun to the depths of the ocean, from space weather to deep sea exploration. And all these data sets try to showcase all that type of data. Now, something that I really want to push today is the idea that we have been working really hard in producing a version of our software that can be used in computers. We have a mobile version that you can download in your phone. So you can have a subset of around 200 data sets, many of them real time, meaning that you can get data up to today in your phone for different variables that I'm going to show you in a minute. But you can have that in your phone, either iOS or Android, and now you can also have it in your computer. So this was software that before it was being sold by $3,000, the license, I think, but we decided to make it free and available for anybody. So now it's completely free. We maintain the data, so we share that with you automatically, and you get the benefit of using all that in whichever way you want it, because we are a federal agency. So everything that we create can be used by anybody and the way they see fit. So I'm gonna move it on to another sharing where I can actually show you the software itself. And I haven't been presenting on Zoom for a while, so I'm a little bit rusty. So this is one of those very interesting visualizations that we have. This is, for example, clouds real time. By real time, what we mean is that we save a cache of 30 days of data. So if you see here the scroll bar in the top, you can see that's going to go from 30 days basically to today. So I'm going to play the last days in the US. And this is a very interesting tool because you can follow specific systems like hurricanes, atmospheric rivers, or storms that create tornadoes. So we have all that data available for you if you want to show something that's timely. And in this section, we have a whole subset of all the real times that you can see it. Between them, sea surface anomaly, vegetations, land surface temperature, earthquakes, drought, and many other variables that we can show. Now, in terms of climate change, we have several models that we have been working with, especially SSP2 and SSP5. So the models are the models that we use in NOAA, the ECM4 models, and we are using the scenarios that were created by the IPCC, which is the UN body that's in charge of researching climate change. So these models basically are the scenarios are telling us different ways that things can happen in the future, and we are running these models up to 2100. You can see the date on the top. And this is, I think, a great tool to start talking about what is going to happen in the future with our planet, depending on the decisions that we make today. We want to be very clear, this is not a forecast. We're not saying that this is exactly the temperature that you are going to have in your state at this time of the year, but it's a very, very good guess in terms of the data and the latest scenarios created. For example, this is SSP2, and we can see how it ends up in 2100. I can change it to SSP5, which is not so benign, I will say, although no scenario right now is benign, unfortunately. But if we actually skip a little bit at the end, you can see a huge difference in terms of temperature. This is 2100. Obviously, the poles are the places more affected. And we use these visualizations to try to show how our decisions today are going to impact our future. So I think that's very important. Something that I've been noticing, at least for the people that I've been talking in the planetarium community, is that a lot of your audiences is very interested on climate change, on what's happening in our planet. And I think that's amazing. Our reach in terms of the program, the spheres, the physical spheres that we have cover around 200 spheres all over the world. I know that's probably orders of magnitude less than planetariums, but definitely not a small number. And the institutions that actually use our datasets count around 60 to 70 million visitors per year. Plus the users that we have online, we have a very good reach, and we are trying to use that reach to be able to explain these scenarios, the things that can happen, the things that we can do as society to try to change these things. In the presentation, a couple presentations ago, it was very clear and mentioned that as a federal agency, we cannot advocate for policy change, we cannot advocate for things, but it was very right in saying that we can offer the most clear and precise information for our audiences to make their own questions and get the right answers from the legislators or the people that is going to take the decisions that is going to affect our future. So again, if you want to download this data, it's free and available for anybody in our catalog and our webpage is also through FTP. We have been also working in a planetarium working group, which I think Brianna is part of, and she's here, and she's from Fisk Planetarium, so hi, Brianna. And we are trying to provide this in a way that's more accessible for planetariums, and we're in the middle of that discussion. We have been doing a lot of inroads with Open Space. Open Space actually is offering a big chunk of the Science on Sphere catalog already as part of their installer. So you can have already in your planetarium if you use Open Space. We are not completely sure about other softwares because they're not open source software, they're commercial software. So if you have information about them or how could we approach to them, because we really want to offer this data in the easiest format for you to ingest, to use, to create things for your audiences. So if anybody wants to contact me and give me more information about anything that you know about the software, the specific software they use for your planetarium, or if you would be interested in getting our data or the things that we have for planetariums, feel free to reach out. I'm gonna leave my email on the document too, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan. I'm so happy to finally get somebody from NOAA here to one of our seminars. And it's pretty clear that every guest here could have their own session at some time. And it's really interesting in the chat to see with the IPS meeting and the ASP meeting, other meetings coming up, that there are people who we didn't have room to invite here that will be speaking at one of those meetings. And I think next up will be John Keller.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay? Great. Just quick side note, I'm not actually in Boulder, Colorado right now. I'm in Jackson, Wyoming, at the brand new Snow King Mountain Planetarium and Observatory. So just want to quickly show you that they've put in a 1 meter plane wave telescope here up at Jackson on top of Snow King. And then they have the outdoor deck with a solar telescope and an observatory it's a 30-person Zeiss planetarium observatory that's in their main dome. So the newest member of the RUMPA collaboration here in Jackson, Wyoming. Joe Zader, the previous student employee from Fisk, is the new director here and is excited to be showing me around. So just happened to be here. And here's Gabrielle, who's just started working in the last, it opened 3 weeks ago, right?
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks, 3 weeks ago. So the newest planetarium in Wyoming. Fisk wanted to share with you briefly 4 planetarium films that we have made over the last 2.5 years. So sharing my screen with you is here. I just wanted to quickly highlight that all of our films at Fisk are free to the public, free to planetarians around the world. We have a network of 750 planetariums in 68 countries and 48 states that have been using our content based upon downloads. And the Fisk production page has the films I'm about to share with you, as well as other films on other topics. The first film I wanted to emphasize is we have a 25-minute film called Climate Change in Our Backyard. This was created through a collaboration with a geology professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. It does focus on the Front Range and the Rocky Mountains and the impact of climate change on the Rockies. But that's the middle section, I would say, of the film. But it also generically talks about the greenhouse effect in general, and then importantly talks about solutions and ways that we can, well, not solutions, but efforts that can be made to try to help address carbon release into the atmosphere. And this is it's a more traditional narrated film with action shots that were taken throughout the Boulder and the Rocky Mountain area. The next two films, super excited to share. Anna Gold had to drop off of this call based upon her schedule, but through a collaboration with the Ceres Center in Boulder and the National Science Foundation, and various partners in Europe, Fisk was able to place two graduate students onto the multidisciplinary drifting observatory for the study of Arctic climate. Mosaic, which was a icebreaker that was, you can see here in the upper right corner, that's an actual picture, an actual shot taken by one of our graduate students. It was an icebreaker that was embedded into an ice sheet, and then they turned off the engines. And for an entire year, the Mosaic Observatory drifted all the way up to 87 degrees north latitude as it then started to drift back down, and then they turned on the engines and drove back. But for an entire year, for 365 days, there were a group of over 50 to 60 scientists, cooks, technicians, individuals supporting this mission to spend an entire year in the Arctic, looking at the interface between the oceans, the sea ice, and the atmosphere to better understand climate in the Arctic. The first film that was produced is Into the Polar Night. That was during the first leg of the trip, and put together a context of what Mosaic was intended to do. Our goal was to release this during that leg one of the trip, but that actually was that was in around April of 2020. And so most planetariums were actually closed due to COVID. And in fact, the ship took off before COVID and then was on the ice throughout the COVID. And had to do a lot of logistics of who could come back, who could come on and off the ship during that time. The second film, Arctic Pulse, is more of a summary film. It's at the end of the leg 6, and it puts together some of the preliminary science that Mosaic had put together. Again, we did have 2 graduate students on board for over 4 months, and so we have some really, really powerful and impressive full dome Arctic footage of both the trials and tribulations of what the work was being done for the Mosaic mission. The final piece is and these are both 25-minute feature-length films. The final piece that we wanted to share is a small, short 5 to 6 minute reel that I strongly recommend people check out. It's called A New Perspective on Time and Humanity. It was produced in collaboration with a nonprofit in Golden, Colorado called the Clock Tower Project, which was rallied around the idea of a clock tower as a place where communities typically would come together to talk about challenges to their community. And we have a clear and present challenge to our community, the global community, which is the climate crisis. And I'm going to stop this sharing and just spend the last minute of my talk showing this in the background. This is not the full dome version of the film, but are you guys all seeing? You're hopefully seeing a screen with are you seeing a screen that says first evidence of photosynthesis?
Yes.
Okay, so this is essentially the 13.8 billion year history of our planet. Each of these rings is a 1 billion year time period. And you can see there's roughly 13.8 of them for the entire universe, with the Earth forming 4.5 billion years ago. And it continues to play and zoom further and further in to the present day. What they've done nicely here with the Clock Tower Project is created spirals upon spirals upon spirals of all different scales to really help the public understand that we live in a 13.8 billion year history as a cosmic community, but zooming into just the last 1,000 years, and then into the last decade, we then see global climate temperatures. Sorry, for the last century. I got my scales wrong. I apologize. I didn't rehearse that. But now we're zooming into the last decades of global temperatures. And the 5-minute reel goes on to then talk about the fact that we're in a critical 10-year decade, right? This is the critical decade that we can decide as a global community whether or not we will come up with alternative energy and other ways to address carbon release to be able to address our community into the future. And so it's, again, a small 5-minute piece that's been made. This is the flat screen version, which you can find on the web. But we also have a full dome version that we can release through our production page. Because Clocktower Project is a nonprofit, and because they did most of the work, we're really just serving as a distribution channel. They do ask for a $10 to $15 or $30 donation for use of their film, but it's well worth the $15 to $30 that they're asking you to donate. If you're interested in shoving a really nice piece around this, like ways in which we view time over cosmic scales as well as over the local and weekly scale. You see that last flash was a weekly calendar, and it really makes the point that what we do today, what we do tomorrow on Saturday evening, will make a difference in the global history of our planet. So I will stop there, but happy to continue to share resources and look forward to seeing many of you in Berlin in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, John. That was very nice. And now we'll go to our last panelist, which is Jeff Bennett.
Thanks. Thanks so much for inviting me to join you today. It's great to see all these incredible resources. I use many of those, especially those from NOAA and NASA all the time in the climate communication work that I do. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an astronomer. I'm the author of textbooks for college astronomy and astrobiology. I've also written a number of children's books. There's a planetarium show from one of mine, Max Goes to the Moon, that some of you may have shown in the past. And for the last decade or so, I've really put a big focus on climate change, going around the country and a little bit around the world, speaking on the topic. And I've written a couple of books, one for kids and one for grown-ups. You'll notice the title, The Wizard Who Saved the World, and for the grown-ups, Pathway to a Post-Global Warming Future. And both of those emphasize what I want to talk a little bit about very briefly today, which is the approach that we should take to climate change. And if you go back about a decade ago, I think a lot of us were mainly concerned with the fact that there was such a big segment of the public that still didn't seem to believe that this was real. That segment has really shrunk. Having the hottest years like we've had recently gets people's attention. And it's less of a problem now of convincing people that this is real as it is of dealing with what is often called climate despair, and particularly among the young people. Because when you see all this data, and it's great to show it, and it's important to show it to help people understand it, when you project it out with the models, the future looks to be either bleak or bleaker. And that's not a very good recipe for inspiring people to want to do something about this. So I like to say we need to teach about climate change with inspiration, not only fear. Fear is a part of it because it is scary, but we have to show that there's a pathway to get away from this. And that's what will actually, I believe, inspire people to action. It's in the chat now that we'll be doing, Travis Rector and I will be doing a session on this at the ASP conference, but we'll be really focusing on this idea that you have to present the real source of the problem, the data, the models, but you also have to present a pathway forward that will make people think, wow, if we do this the right way, we could have a future that's not bleak or bleaker, but a future that's really amazing. And with just a short time here, I won't go through all the details, but I'll just give you the short summary of how we get to that. And it's really very simple. If we solve this problem soon enough, the way we're going to solve it is by creating new energy sources that can replace the energy that we've been using. And if we do it in the right way, these energy sources will actually provide us with far more energy than we have today at lower prices than we have today and without the consequences of climate change. And if you go off to say mid-century, you can imagine one of those might be something like nuclear fusion or deep geothermal energy that you can get anywhere around the world by drilling deep enough into the earth. Many other possibilities. The point is, if you achieve that, you've stopped climate change from getting worse, but you now have an abundant amount of energy that you can use to start doing things like direct air capture, where you start to bring the carbon dioxide level back down. And that means you can project out towards the year 2100 and imagine that not only did we stop increasing the carbon dioxide concentration, but we actually started bringing it back down towards James Hansen's target goal of 350 parts per million, where he says we would basically have undone much of the damage that we've done to this point, as long as we haven't hit an irreversible tipping point in the meantime. So the urgency is around making sure we don't let this problem get to the irreversible point. But the hope is that in doing so, we can set up a future where our kids today who will be alive in the year 2100 and beyond can be living in a world that's much, much better than the world and the climate that we have today. So I'll stop there. And I'm always happy, by the way, if anyone needs help with anything, I'm always happy to help review things, take a look at things, add my commentary, just get in touch with me.
Wow. Okay, great. That ends the short presentation phase of the panelists, and we can just open it up for discussion if anybody wants to jump in. So I'll jump in first. I have a few questions written down, but I'll pick one. I think one thing to be aware of is that just like Juan was talking about different planetarium systems, there's also different planetariums in terms of their capabilities. Some planetariums do very good jobs even using something like a very old projector that's not digital. And so when they do things, they would probably be using a flat screen type projector. There's, if I said museums, I meant planetariums. There's planetariums like mine, which is small, non-commercial, volunteer run, in which case we do have a digital projector, but it's complicated to do anything that's done through a browser. The projection system itself requires things to reside on disk. If I want to do something that is on a browser, then I would probably set up a classroom type projector and project on the dome. I honestly don't know if there's a way to kind of de-warp or warp in the opposite direction where you can go from a flat screen media and then project with a full dome type type lens. That would be another option. And in the town halls, I think I got this from Mark when he made a comment that sometimes it's important to think about how all types of planetariums can use stuff. Those who don't have like a museum attached, those who don't have the budget and the staff to develop really elaborate programs. And a lot of climate change really has to do with conversation and how to work with people anyway. But I wanted to put that out as part of our discussion. And I will say that Alan has very much wanted to understand how to bring interactivity into what we do using these resources.
Rosemary can respond to two or three of those things. I forgot to mention that along with the Mosaic film that we made, series put together a curriculum around climate change and the polar mission, whatnot, an activity of students putting their hands in ice and trying to tie ropes and tie knots with ropes as though they were in the Arctic, living the Mosaic dream. And so there's a series of interactive resources that go along with that Mosaic film that can be done in a classroom. And Brianna may be able to speak more to how that is being disseminated, because I apologize, I actually don't know that. But I do also totally, value the perspective that every planetarium has different technical capabilities, resources, and capacity. I think the most important thing is, right, people view planetariums as places where they can come to get trusted knowledge, trusted understanding, trusted STEM conversations, right? And so regardless of the way in which you're having a discussion around climate change, right, that's a space where people can still come and engage, as you talked about in that discussion, of really just having a talk about what we know about climate, as Jessica was saying, what are the things we can do and what's the urgency of being able to do that. For our films themselves, we do provide both MP4 masters that are already in full dome version that you can download and then store on your computer and play. And then we also provide frames of 1K, 2K, and 4K, as well as reflective portable dome format. And so they're in formats that you can download and have in your system. But I also realize that it takes the technical staff and time to do that, right? It's not always seamless to get the films into the space. But our staff is happy to help individual. Like if you are going down that path and would like extra support, FIS can provide that to the extent possible that we can. And I had a third comment, but I forgot what it is, so I'll stop now and share the floor with others.
I would say that most people who have provided full dome films have done so in a way that's really easy to incorporate, even into the small systems, as long as they're digital. And that's been very useful for us.
I'm gonna jump in here and share a little bit of the things that we have learned. Something to mention is the Science and Sphere is a program that's under the Office of Education of NOAA. So we have a much educational focus, goals, and the things that we try to do and how we try to share things with the public. It's something that we have been learning now and trying to apply to the things that we design is that, and this happens a lot in institutions like ours that are mainly research or scientific institutions, that sometimes we put a lot of focus on the science. We try to focus a lot on this minority that still doesn't believe in climate change, and we try to convince them with data and with images and with graphs and with data. But something that we have learned is that the biggest majority of people who do believe in climate change, they are not so interested on the data. They are not so interested on the science. They are interested in what they can do about it. And I think that's something that we are trying to emphasize more. We are still showing the data because we believe it's important, but that is no longer our centerpiece, I will say. We will try to move it to strategies, adaptation, mitigation, things that people can do in their own communities. And NOAA is offering a lot of grants in that regard, not only for research, but a lot of community organizations that can do small projects on their own backyards even, but they actually have a lot of much more impact sometimes than research, because they are doing something where they feel empowered. And that's something that I remember a lot, that we had a conversation just recently during the workshop that we have with all institutions with Science and Sphere. There was a panel from youth that they were talking about climate change. And I remember one of the ladies there, she's in high school, and she said, during my whole life, I've been terrified of climate change. The only thing that I knew about climate change was fear. I was afraid of it until I was able to participate in this community, which was the Wild Center on New York. And I found a home where I was able to transform that fear into action. So that was incredibly powerful for me. And that didn't come through data or science per se, but it came through the action that people can do and the empowerment that those actions provide to, especially to youth. So that's something that we are still learning. I don't think there are silver bullets for this. I think we have to try many things, but this is one of the things that we're trying now.
Well, I have a question for Mark Subarao. You mentioned a thing that was a function that was where you could switch and show what is human caused uh, and what is natural on the globe, and that that was a big. I mean, a few years ago, that was a big point of debate. And, when people thought that it wasn't even human caused at all. But where does that? I mean, my question is, how is that determined?
Yeah,
That's
and so in this case,
thing.
just to be clear, we're talking about carbon dioxide.
Yes.
So this is a it's a supercomputer model. It's an assimilated model, which means it brings in all the observations and the satellite information. It also brings in things like our weather, what the weather model is, which ways the wind is blowing, where we think emissions are. And so that particular visualization, I believe, is for the year 2021. And so, literally the model knows, like, what's this source from a power plant? Where, is it, you see, the really interesting thing, I think, is to see the natural systems, right? Because you see where it's being absorbed on the surface. You see the forest puffing in and out every single day. They'll sort of like forest animal will puff at night. It puffs out CO2. It sucks it right back in the day, and we can kind of track that in their various components over the year. So, for example, at this time in the year, for a year, we'll actually be carbon negative because we're in the summer in the northern hemisphere. Most of the land is the ocean, and the land have pulled in more carbon dioxide than we're emitted. But that kind of turns around. So you see that seasonal cycle, and you can see, yeah, we break it down into 4 components. Fossil fuels, burning, like from fires, which of course last year was much higher than usual because of Canada, the ocean, and the land. We're doing a similar visualization, which we'll release soon, which has tagged methane. So you'll see in that case it's landfills. There's no absorption of methane, unfortunately, it just disappears. But you'll see but there are natural sources like wetlands as well, which have a seasonal cycle. And so the idea with the interactivity in the digital system is you can have buttons, you can show each one separately, you can combine them in different ways, and sort of get at that fuller picture of, like, the human, the natural, the interaction between the two.
Well, I'll follow up that, my focus is on how to get the audience involved in it actively. And that it seems like it's hard to come up with, but just using that example of the human source versus natural, would there be a way to bring the audience in? Because identifying where the power plants are, or are there, I don't know if there are labels on these interactive things that explain things, but what you just explained is critical to understanding the visualization. And that's true of many visualizations. Understanding what it's actually doing requires explanation or further understanding.
Yeah, I've been working with an educator recently around this sort of. This is somewhat related, but a new data literacy technique that's becoming popular called slow reveal graphs. But this idea of a slow reveal where you show one component at a time, you keep adding components, and that's done in a guided, facilitated way with questions, and even the point being that at first everything's not obvious or clear, right? And so you cause people to make hypotheses based on how things look about what things are. And it seems to be a very powerful way to sort of build that up. So that in my mind, that's the kind of functionality we were enabling. You could go in a different direction depending on what answers you got. You could, people made the suggestion, maybe it's this, you could be like, yep, we can see that component. Yeah, that's the kind of way I was imagining it. But I think our idea from our point is to make this toolkit where people have all the components so they can put it together however they want.
I think,
And just in case, to answer your question about how do we know if it's human or not, I post a article there that explains that precisely from NOAA, and coming from our observations, we can actually determine what type of carbon by using the ratio of carbon-14, which is much older in terms of radioactivity, and that way we can determine if that is coming from fossil fuels that were created several thousand years ago or something newer like vegetation.
yeah, and your point about having solutions, which strategies to deal with the problem is really important, and that's another area where I'm struggling to find out how to get the audience participation involved in that. It's a difficult area, but I'd like to get ideas from the audience of what they can do or what they think should be done.
It's interesting. I mean, I've seen some reports because there's this huge mismatch between what people think is the actions they think are effective and what actions actually are effective. And sort of probing at that, the difference, the impacts between, the kinds of things people will suggest versus might be a way to approach it.
Jeff Bennett gave a talk at Fisk a couple of months ago that I was it was actually the longer version of the 5-minute version we just heard, but it was very, very impactful. And, he ended with the very political but important piece that people need to vote, right? We can't just have individual action, we need governmental and policy action. And so it really does come down to an electorate, and how do we encourage people, regardless of how you vote, just make sure you're voting so that there's a discourse and discussion that our legislatures are required to act upon and be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that. That we have a new show that we just started this summer that's about the oceans, and we end with a little bit about how climate change is affecting ocean life, right? Showing coral bleaching, for example, at a site in Florida. And we try to engage the audience in this question of, what kind of actions do you think you can take? And, our audiences tend to be very young. And so we're trying to, we're trying not to scare the kids. But we want them to think about what can you do in your life that helps the situation. And that is a very tough conversation, because a lot of kids will think of, really, they'll be thoughtful, right? And they'll think about things they can do. But we have been trying to make sure that we put in that little bit of thought about, the thing that really does matter, though, is the collective action that we're all taking, which, does depend on government to really move that in any significant way. And but that's a tough conversation to have with little kids. So sometimes we say that with the hope that the parents who are there with their kids are thinking a little bit about that, right?
Something else I want to share too, that we have created a little bit of a differentiation also in NOAA in terms of just talking about climate change and also talking about resilience. So we are 100% engaged in what is climate change, but sometimes, and as you mentioned, climate change is a very big problem. It's a problem that effective solutions have to come sometimes from the top, which is very encouraging for people. So we have developed this idea of resilience. So what is resilience? The idea of resilience is that we have to be prepared for the changes that are already here. So it's not just waiting or hoping for a solution or working for a solution, but it's prepare ourselves to the changes that are already happening. So I heard one amazing explanation about that was resilience. It's like building your sand castle in the beach. What happens if a wave comes in and it washes it out? Are you going to build it in the same place? Are you going to build it a little bit farther back? Are you going to try to create a wall around it? So it's not just thinking about the solution of how not getting that wave. It's also when that wave comes, we have to be prepared for that wave. So NOAA has developed this idea of the climate resilience and how to be prepared for it. I'm posting a link down there. And that sometimes, even though are smaller actions that you can take in your own community to be more resilient, that definitely empowers people to be thinking about the bigger picture and keeps them and allows them to organize each other. And then you can start thinking in something bigger. But going from the individual to the government, sometimes a very big jump. So we believe that this idea of resilience and that try to be prepared in our own community for the changes that are here already, that also empower us to be more proactive in terms of climate change, which is the bigger problem to solve, I think.
I'll just add with kids, I think kids are actually very responsive to this idea that you might say global warming is a global problem and therefore it requires collective action because kids are idealistic and they see that as I want to be a part of this. And I think if we can make that emphasis that no matter what you are doing specifically, what your own career is, as long as you are willing to be a part of the solution and help out in whatever ways you can make this happen for everyone.
And youth is very, very powerful in this regard sometimes because I know there was a study where they were following education, climate education and girls and the impact that it had in the household. And they found out that a lot of, especially dads, were much more affected for the opinions of the daughters, for example, in terms of actions like recycling or creating gardens or doing stuff just to change their views or modify their attitudes. Youth can be very, very powerful with their own messages. They can be very persuasive. I'm a parent and I know that firsthand, and probably many of you know that you're going to do a lot for your kids. And if they bring that message home, sometimes you're going to listen them a lot more than you will listen to a scientist, for example.
And I'll just add, and this is a little bit of a plug for that clock tower video that John talked about too. There's a time scale issue here, right? In the news, we're always hearing about, the next 10 years or maybe 20 or 30. But the kids today, like I said, they're going to be alive in the year 2100 and beyond. And so when we talk to kids and say, what are you going to be telling your grandkids? What will your story be on your 100th birthday, which is going to be well beyond the year 2100? You get people thinking in that longer term view, and kids can take that to their parents and say, what are you doing about making sure that the world that I live in the future will be the kind of world that you want me to live in?
I posted in the chat one of my favorite studies. I think maybe because it justifies my very data intensive approach to climate education. And that because we talk a lot about how reducing the knowledge deficit doesn't change people's opinions and whatnot. But this is interesting. It shows that more climate change knowledge actually reduces climate change anxiety. And the reality is not all of the actual knowledge is catastrophic. As bad as things are, it's not as bad as many people seem to think they are, or as intractable.
Yeah, actually, I hear a lot of alarmists saying things that really can't, like the extinction of the human race. That's
yeah, I mean, it's quite
certainly
common,
possible, but it's pretty unlikely.
And generationally, especially, I think, there are huge differences. So.
Well, this is a lot of food for thought, and for me, I'm still chomping through, how can we take some of these resources, like a specific resource, and make it into an activity where people have discussions or answer, pose a question that they can answer. Maybe there's some planetariums have A, B, C, D choice systems, where you pose a question and see what people think. Those are that's I say a primitive way, kind of getting people involved in the process. But there's also non-technological ways of getting them involved with answering questions. And so the challenge for me is to figure out what are good questions to pose for the audience and get them involved in answering them.
And when you have those questions, share them with us, because I think everybody's looking for those.
Well, if we come up with an audience participation program on climate change, then yes,
Please
should
do so.
publish it. But we need more than just one program like that.
Nonetheless, that might be a follow-up seminar later in the year or the first part of next year. I'm going to put something in the chat, which a lot of people don't know about. If I copied it. There's something called the Earth to Sky Partnership, which is led by NASA outside of from Goddard, and but it's a partnership with a lot of the federal agencies, including people like the National Park Service. And you can go to their website and you have to join, but it's just giving them an email address essentially. And then there's more resources there. And they focus a lot on communication, and they have training sessions sometimes a local class, which I was able to take here, focusing on Southeast Alaska, which is where I live, trying to make it local. And I think they also have a virtual class coming up if people are interested in becoming involved with that. It's also used like for park interpreters as well as people from the museum and informal education community. So it's almost an hour and a half in. It's going to take a little time to go through the resources, maybe clean things up a little bit, but anybody here can download a transcript. It starts from whenever you joined the meeting. You can download the chat again from whenever you joined the meeting. And Alan and I will be pulling together the resources, the video, and uploading them. And when that's ready, it'll be posted on Dome Dialogues, and the PPA website, PPA email list as to when they're available. Seems like there was something else to say, but I think I don't remember. So maybe that's it. I was just going to suggest if there's more dialogue along these lines, that those forums are also places to put things out to the community as well. So any last words?
Thank you, Rosemary, for organizing and pulling this all together. This is great.
It's my pleasure because I finally got to talk to these people. And we've got a lot of recordings and information here to spread to others as well. Okay, so thank you very much. And I'm going to leave this open a little bit in case you are trying to do the chat and the transcripts, but I'm going to stop the recording.